Emily and Mitchell Clionsky, a physician and neuropsychologist couple who have cared for their own parents with dementia, have created an innovative test used by doctors to measure cognitive function and have treated more than 25,000 patients with cognitive impairment. In their new book, Dementia Prevention, Using Your Head to Save Your Brain, which I love the title, they combine the most current scientific findings about Alzheimer's disease and other dementias with their own experience to present a practical guide that empowers people to improve our brain functions. So this book is a culmination of your 35 years of extensive clinical evaluation and treatment, and I think a great way to take us inside your consulting rooms and make that your knowledge available to readers across the country and across the world. I'd like to start by asking about the Dementia Prevention checklist.
So the question is always, who gets to talk first? So
I'm surprised at you, Emily.
Well, actually, the Dementia Prevention checklist came out of Mitch's great sense of organization, not mine. But it is the culmination of all of the available evidence-based research in the world that we have put together in the book, that we tested in our practices, and that we found worked and really did stabilize people's cognition. And we didn't want to just stabilize or improve somebody's cognition. We wanted to make sure that at some point we got to prevent as much as possible the fact that they might be getting demented or cognitively impaired in the future. So when we were starting to write the book, it became very apparent to Mitch that what we really should do is come up with a checklist that an everyday human being could use and could actually assess where they were at with respect to all these reversible factors that could help them prevent becoming like their parents who may have been demented, or their aunt or their uncle. And so he really is to be credited with the organizational part of this. And we felt, and I concurred with him completely, we needed to give people something that they could hold in their hand and work with and take to their doctor and say, look, the research says if I do this, this, and this, I might stand a much better chance of not getting demented. And so, doc, how do we go about checking these things? Because what the most recent Alzheimer's Association survey found out is that approximately 1 out of 2 American doctors do not feel comfortable about talking about dementia with their patients, not to mention their patients' families. They can barely talk about it with the patient, much to mention the patient's child or caregiver.
Yeah.
So we felt this was a way of giving you a way of controlling that discussion with your physician, as well as a way of controlling your own health.
I think it's great. So Mitch, walk me through the checklist.
So basically, the checklist has, I believe, 26 questions on it. They're factual questions about your own health. And it really works from the model of dementia prevention that we build chapter to chapter in the book. So we start off with basic information about dementia, how not all dementia is Alzheimer's disease. We talk about various forms of dementia. We talk about some of the history of how Alzheimer's sort of chanced into this in some ways. We talk about each of the factors dealing with heredity and early life development. We talk about the cerebrovascular and cardiovascular kinds of diseases, which are so important, obesity feeding into diabetes and hypertension and smoking. We talk about sleep apnea, which is perhaps what most people don't think of when they think about what could affect my brain, but breathing while you're sleeping really does. Then we look at various vitamins and nutrients that are supposed to be there at certain levels and may not be. We look at the kind of medications which people are either prescribed with some untoward side effects or things that they buy for themselves in their local pharmacy that they don't realize actually can affect their thinking. We talk about loneliness and isolation. We talk about mental stimulation. Well, some of the most recent stuff has to do with hearing loss and visual loss.
Yeah.
In terms of impacting our brain function and how that can make a difference. Talk about depression and anxiety, alcohol, drug use. So basically, there's all these different factors, all impinging upon dementia risk. The Dementia Prevention Checklist takes you through each of those, asking for questions. Sometimes it's as basic as putting in your height and your weight and calculating a body mass index. Sometimes it's getting some blood tests that your doctor has already drawn, and you don't know the numbers. What's your hemoglobin A1C? Sometimes it's asking you, how many drinks do you typically have in a day? And are your drinks a standard drink, or do you sort of just free pour and you're really having 2 or 3? Because that can make a difference. So by going through these, we essentially try to get the person to participate in looking at these factors after they've read about them. So the first 10 chapters are all about the background factors. Then chapter 11 starts with, okay, here, take the test. We're going to have this in the book, but also with a QR code to go to our website, now under construction, but it'll soon be done, braindoc.com, where the person will be able to take the test online, print out a report for themselves that they can hand carry with them, or email if they want to. It's going to be a PDF at the end. And give them now, here's your marching orders. So you can start with the areas that you don't know much about, fill in those blanks. You can start with the areas that are really on target based on, here's my blood pressure, 125/80. Great. Don't have to worry about that. Keep taking your medication or doing what you're doing. Or it could be that you start with, here's where I'm off target and I need to now change my behavior. So that's the whole purpose for that.
It's very much like you said, talk about off target, very much like a roadmap in a sense. When and Emily, you're the MD, and so you have people coming into your office saying something that we hear at our Fearless Caregiver conferences every single time over the last 25 years. What's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? And it's really nice when there's somebody there who could really explain the difference. A weight goes off their shoulders, but also, like Mitch was saying, the BMI. What are you supposed to know about A1Cs? What are the basic things you think that we as civilians should know about when our doctors rattle off these numbers, so we could stop and try to figure out where we are on this destination?
And you're right on point with that, Gary, because it really is. In some cases, some doctors have been really looking at these factors, but they don't really translate the information in a usable form to the person who's eventually going to have to live with the result. And so this book is geared to the average person who's just really worried about doing everything that they can. And maybe they can't do everything to reverse all their dementia risks. But what the science has told us is that if you can start to do 1 or 2 things, that in itself is significant and will have a major impact. So if we can just convince one person to begin the process and start with one targeted area, it's going to make a difference in their lives.
And you both have said the R word, reversible. Is this something that we can look at this book at some place in our journey and say, well, if I follow those tips and I follow the checklist, I can potentially reverse the damage I've already done?
We've got a great statistic for that, Mitch. Why don't you do it? He does it better than I do.
The statistic is that 1 out of 2 cases of dementia are preventable or delayable to the point where you're going to die before you get demented.
Die of something else.
Right. Yeah. So imagine what that would be like. I like to think about this in terms of imagining. Imagine if half of the nursing home beds for dementia could be eliminated. Imagine if half of the caregivers could go back to work rather than staying home and caring for their loved one. Imagine what the cost saving would be. We're willing to consider paying $20,000 to $50,000 a year for a new medication, which may slow down by a small amount the decline in cognition. And this doesn't cost that. In most cases, it's free. The cost of a pair of sneakers, if you're going to walk 10 minutes 3 times a day, get 30 minutes of exercise 7 days a week, 210 minutes of exercise a week is right in that sweet spot of 150 to 300 minutes a week that the American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, they're all recommending. What did that cost you? So that's what we're looking to do, is not even so much prevent or reverse, but actually to prevent that decline. We catch people, especially in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, but even so in their 60s and 70s. It's not too late.
Well, thank you for that. But so that's bit of good news. But what I love about the book is that, like you say, it's for the average person who doesn't have the medical degrees that you guys have and the years of experience you have. And there are examples and tips, and it's very accessible. I think that makes the difference, rather than talking about even the statistics that you just mentioned are accessible and examples of a reason I need to change my my course, as opposed to just scientific mumbo jumbo, which is a technical term.
Exactly, which we love. We love mumbo jumbo. We love
smoke and
mirrors.
and
But these are the people that we see in our clinic who come in and we test them, and their cognition is impaired, and they've got mild cognitive impairment. They're already losing cognitive abilities. It's measurable in comparison to people of their age and background. And what's really wonderful is when we talk with them, and this is where this came from, we developed these and applied them, and their test scores on repeated testing get better, and they start feeling better. And now we're engaged in a very positive process, because they say, wow, I'm going to go do more. And then we start to see their scores normalize. And I've got a bunch of these people who came in at mild cognitive impairment, should not be getting better at this point if you just look at the raw statistics, but are back to normal cognition. And I'm saying, I don't have anything to offer at this point. Pick up the book if you like, but you've picked up a lot of this already. See it if you need us, but don't come back on a regular basis like you have in the past. The book is the chance to take this stuff that we do in the consulting room and put it out for a readership that otherwise can't get in to see us and doesn't have that ability. That's what this is about, for me at least.
And part of where that came out of literally was when I would see my patients, I would absolutely insist that their families, that their caregiver, I don't care who it was, their loved one, their partner, came with them, because I knew I couldn't trust them being able to execute a plan or even really understand, possibly depending on how demented they already were, the significance of what I was telling them. So it really, we had to build a very close alliance, and they would always come in with their loved one. And somewhere around the second or third visit, when I would be giving them the list of, well, we're going to fix your homocysteine, we're going to fix your methylmalonic acid, and we're going to go get that sleep test, and this is the next set of blood work, and this is the vitamin you need to take. The third visit, they come in and say, but what about me? What can you do for me to keep me from getting like mom? And it got to the point where I'd say, you've got all the blood tests I ordered. We've got this whole plan worked out for her. Now what you need to do, because you're not impaired yet, so you can't come in my door and see me. You've got to go to your primary care doctor and say, look, I'm at risk for this doc. Can we please fix this while we have a chance? So this is just the next logical step.
And another thing I've learned talking to caregivers all these years is that we want the caregivers to see themselves as the CEO of Caring for My Loved One Inc. That they're
absolutely.
not only an equal member of the care team, but in charge of the care team, and that caring for themselves is job one. So everything you said just fits within that. And frankly, sometimes, their loved one's primary physician who they've known for 35 years doesn't see it as well as somebody who's able to assess the neurological implications. What advice do you guys have for caregivers when they want to make sure that their loved one goes to an appropriate physician, and they kind of have to argue with their loved one's physician about that?
I think we'll answer that separately, because I tend to be a bit more blunt about it than Mitch. So why don't you start with him?
Well, not being a physician, as a neuropsychologist, I can make recommendations. I can hold the doctor's hand. I can't order these tests. I can't order these medications. Consequently, I've learned over the years that I have to be more diplomatic. And so I write reports that have a whole list of recommendations. When it comes back and it's the third evaluation, perhaps, and they haven't followed through on most of them, I actually do talk about them, about getting a specialist, seek a different doctor, perhaps. It's hard these days. A lot of doctors are retiring, so it's harder to get people, but they're not willing to just let it be. And I'm supportive of that.
Now, that's the soft side of this equation.
The very soft side of it.
I'm the carrot.
I'm a bit more blunt than that, because I was really at the front edge of so many families saying to me, we brought him here to see you and things started to get better and you've done all this stuff. Well, why wasn't his primary care doctor doing this up until now? So that was a hard question to answer tactfully, especially in a small city. And eventually I got pretty tired of answering it tactfully, because really and truly, this work can be done by doctors who just follow a methodology that makes sense and is research-based. So now when it comes down to something like that, I'm pretty blunt and say, look, if your doctor's not willing to do this for you, or not willing to actively participate in your care at this level, you deserve to find either a new physician for your loved one, or you need to find a new physician for yourself. And I'm finding that's going down a whole lot more easily than it did 10 years ago, 15 years ago, because people are now finally understanding that it's our body, it's our brains that are paying the cost for not receiving optimal health care. And this is now, there are 10 specific things that we can do today, that we can start doing today, that are going to make a difference to our lives as we age. So we're entitled to be able to do that. And we deserve to have our doctors helping us, and our nurse practitioners and our physician's assistants.
Ergo, fearless caregiver, stand up to the doc. And if you do it in that manner, then it's only good patient care, even when you're the patient.
Exactly.
But I like what you said about the caregivers taking care of themselves, because that's a big theme in our practice. We see a lot of very selfless people, and sometimes they feel they're so selfless, they have a hard time making time for themselves, taking care of themselves properly. I tell them it has to do with junior life saving. They look at me and they say, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, when I was 12 years old, I took a course in junior life saving. And at the end of it, we're supposed to be able to pull this very heavy guy up from the bottom of this deep end of the pool. I failed the test. Never got my junior life saving badge, but I learned a very valuable lesson. Rule number one in life saving is nobody ever saved anyone by drowning themselves. Save yourself first."
By the way, I love that. I'm stealing that, but I'm going to credit you when I say it.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Very powerful message.
Absolutely.
Hey, go ahead.
Okay. When we take a look at the data, Gary, on the impact of caring for dementia on our caregivers, it's staggering, the health cost and the pain that these people go through, even if they started off in a better physical state and a better mental state than their partner did. And it can happen very, very quickly. So we're pretty aggressive about getting them, if they need psychosocial support, to a therapist, about getting them the help they require. Yeah, it's critical.
Well, bless you for that. One of the other things about the book that says something about it is that it's been vetted by Johns Hopkins University. So that's very nice.
We chose to go to an academic press as opposed to a popular press as a starting point. There's a plus and a minus. The plus is that if you make it through the process, you know that it's real science, because that's who's looking at it, that's who's reviewing, and that's part of their process. So we feel really proud of that. On the other hand, that's a press that, aside from the 36-hour day, is not necessarily used to having a wide audience, which is why when it comes to now promoting the book and trying to get the word out, we want to talk with you, we want to talk with a lot of other people, because we don't want it to just be read by a small number of academics. We're really hoping to save some brains in the process here.
I think every doctor should buy a stack, and when somebody comes in with this issue, hand it to their patient. That's just what I think.
From your mouth to God's ear.
Hey, before we leave, before we leave, I just want to ask you something that I ask in every interview, and I'll ask it twice. Starting with Emily. What's the one most important piece of advice you'd like to share with family caregivers?
Wow, that's a big question.
That's why I ask it, but I don't answer it.
I would really have to say that become dedicated to the notion that you can make your life better, that you can live a full and genuine and passionate existence, just so long as you're the one who makes up your mind to do so, and do it sooner than later. Live vibrantly, live passionately, and do everything that you can to live second by second by second, because this is the only one we've got.
I love that. I've, asked this question of experts and legal experts and celebrities, and honestly, that's my top answer. So, Mitch, you got a long way to go.
So I'll give you two answers.
Okay.
That's the only way I'm going to be able to get around this, is give you two answers.
Probably.
The first is the advice it's not so much advice I give to caregivers, but it's the praise that I give caregivers. I must say, I learned this from Emily, because she does this, and I've incorporated it as part of what I do. I see some really amazing people caring for their parents or their spouses, especially with the parents and somebody's grandparents. And what I tell them is, I'll turn to the patient, I'll say, you did a really good job raising this person, because they're doing a really good job in caring for you.
Nice.
And it could only happen due to your good parenting. The thing I tell the caregivers is what we say in the book, which is, don't be a dementia warrior, become a prevention warrior.
Okay, so you both win the prize. I need to come up with give you one of those awards back there. Thank you for all you do for caregivers. Thank you. I can't wait for the book to come out. It's a caregiver.com book club book, so people can find it on our website. And keep doing what you're doing.
Gary, thank you for the great work that you're doing, because the more people hear this kind of information, and you're making it accessible, you're making it real to them. Thank you for this.
Thank you, guys. Take care.